We are joined by John Bolton, former United States National Security Advisor. Hello, thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be with you.
First, I would like to ask, do you see a solution to the current situation in the Middle East? The tensions are rising, and while in Tel Aviv, Emmanuel Macron called for an international coalition to be formed to fight Hamas. Would something like that be effective?
Well, I was a little surprised to hear that from President Macron. I don't see it coming in the near term. I think the big question at the moment is what's the strategy of the government of Israel? I think people had expected that there would be an incursion into Gaza before now. Prime Minister Netanyahu's obviously under pressure from President Biden not to invade. I think this is a mistake. I think it shows weakness, particularly to Iran, which is the puppet master in this whole affair. Obviously, if Israel has military reasons not to act, or if it's the United States that's asking because of our military preparations, that's one thing. But if this is simply a delay strategy, which I'm afraid it may be, I think that works to everybody's disadvantage. The only actor that's really advantaged by it is Iran.
You are talking about the IDF's ground offensive, and naturally, it's on everyone's mind right now. And you mentioned that it is the focal point of the current escalation. Why do you think it keeps getting delayed? Is it due to U.S.'s pressure or other factors?
Well, it could be indecision within the Israeli government. By public statements, the Israeli Defense Forces are saying, we're ready, we're just waiting for a political decision. I think Netanyahu may be worried about losing support from Biden. I would just tell Netanyahu that he doesn't have anything to worry about. The American people support a vigorous Israeli effort to do what Israel said its objective is, which is to destroy Hamas's capacity to inflict terror on Israel. And I don't think President Biden has much discretion in that regard. I just think unless there are compelling military reasons to hold up, the sooner Israel acts, the better, because Iran is drawing all the wrong conclusions from this delay. I think it looks like weakness on the part of Israel and the United States. And if that's what Iran believes and it unleashes Hezbollah, this whole situation could get worse.
From what I hear, the main point of criticism of Israel's plans for the ground offensive is the civilian population density in Gaza, especially in the central districts of the city. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think Israel has a very well-trained army. I think they will do everything they can to avoid unnecessary civilian casualties. I think we have to be clear where the responsibility is. It lies with Hamas and Iran for having turned Gaza into basically an armed camp over the past 16 years. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2006. Hamas has been in control since 2007. So it's Hamas that's been acting as the terrorist here in its attacks on Israel and the way it endangers its own people. I think the people of Israel have a right to live their lives free of the fear of terrorist attack, and I think that's what the incursion is intended to do.
Это понятно, но вы, как бывший посол Соединенных Штатов в ООН... That is understood. However, you as the former U.S. ambassador to the UN know better than most that the kind of reaction that civilian deaths in Gaza, obviously through the fault of Hamas, but nonetheless, obviously that would cause Israel's relations with Western countries and partners to sour. How would Israel go about getting their point across that a ground offensive is the only option? Is it really a big problem for Israel?
Well, I think it will be a political problem because Iran will try to exploit it, and the issue here is not following the laws of war. Israel's going to do that. The state of Gaza, in effect, attacked the state of Israel on October the 7th, and so who is responsible for the care and feeding of the people of Gaza? It's the government of Gaza, and that's Hamas. They just don't care about it. So I think it's a matter of for Israel and its friends to try and explain this. It's a difficult proposition, but the real danger here is if Iran, seeing this weakness in Israel's position at the moment, this indecision, this hesitancy, if they think they can unleash Hezbollah from the north, it will make things worse for everybody.
Уже сейчас ситуация крайне непростая, мягко говоря.
Well, the situation is already pretty dire, and we are already seeing fighting in the north. Am I understanding you correctly that protecting civilians in the Gaza Strip is essentially impossible? Is there at least a chance to save lives? Because there are children there, and women, and many of those who have nothing to do with the fighting.
It's true, and Hamas is very cynically putting them in danger. If there were a way to eliminate all civilian casualties, I think the Israelis would leap at it. But the fact is, unless you're prepared to say Israel has to live in fear of terror attacks and therefore can do nothing, Israel doesn't really have much of an alternative given the situation Hamas has created in the Gaza Strip.
Господин Болтон, если...
Mr. Bolton, if Iran were to see weakness and decide to join the war in the Middle East directly, what kind of consequence would follow? Would it mean that we would then be past the point of no return and World War III would be inevitable?
No, I don't think there's a prospect of World War III. I think Iran is already involved here. I don't think Hamas would have attacked Israel without Iran's acquiescence. And over the years, Iran has not given Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, other terrorist groups in the region, all of the weapons and training and assistance, financial assistance and other guidance that they have for these groups, for Hamas or Hezbollah, to use them at their discretion. They were given these resources to use at Iran's discretion. And I think Iran is testing the little Satan, Israel, as they call it, and looking to see whether or not it can hurt the great Satan, the United States, as well. So we don't know what Iran's strategy is. I think it was an intelligence failure by both Israel and the United States in not seeing the October 7 attack before it took place. So we have to be prepared for the possibility that Iran is looking for a confrontation, in large part because they see weakness by the United States and Israel.
Я бы хотела вас, конечно, спросить...
Mr. Bolton, I would of course like to ask you about Russia's interests. We see how Biden publicly compares Putin and Hamas. He is talking about a new world order. It appears that we are returning to the times when the term axis of evil was coined. What do you think of such comparisons? Do they ring true today?
Well, I've been saying for some time there is a new axis between Beijing and Moscow, this time with Beijing as the senior partner, and they've got allies, North Korea, Iran, Syria, Belarus. I think it's a very dangerous situation. And I would just note, about a week ago, the Russian Foreign Ministry criticized Israel for attacking locations in Syria, saying it was a violation of Syrian sovereignty and international law. That's the first time, I believe, Russia has done that in many years. Israel has had a free hand in Syrian airspace to the extent it just deconflicts with Russian forces there. So if that signals a greater Russian role in an effort to deny Israel a free hand in Syria, that could be a very major shift in Russian position and really making the situation much more dangerous.
Но Владимир Путин и террористическое движение Хамас...
But in your opinion, are Vladimir Putin and the terrorist organization Hamas on the same plane? Or is the likeness a bit exaggerated?
Well, I think what Biden was specifically comparing was the conduct of elements of the Russian military in Ukraine, where there's evidence of terrorist activity. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. And it's a sad commentary that we've got two of these major conflicts underway at the same time, and who knows what China is thinking of doing along its Indo-Pacific periphery. And I think part of the answer here is that there needs to be a stronger American position, both with respect to Ukraine and in the Middle East, and with respect to China. I think otherwise we're in really grave danger of instability spreading around the world.
А как вы вообще оцениваете интересы России на Ближнем Востоке, конкретно в этом?
How would you describe Russia's interest in the Middle East and in this specific intensification of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Are we able to say that Russia is involved in any way?
Well, in earlier times, the Russian position was always, the Soviet position was always pro-Palestinian. I think what may have changed here is the growing closeness of Iran and Russia. Iran selling drones to Russia to use in Ukraine, and the possibility that Putin sees that it's advantageous to Russia basically to take a more active role, contrary to Israel, contrary to the United States. He hasn't said that publicly, but I don't know how else to explain that foreign ministry criticism of Israeli conduct in Syria that's been going on for the past 10 years, and only now does the foreign ministry find it to be a violation of international law.
Последнее, о чем хотела бы вас спросить, это...
The last question I wanted to ask you is about hostages. Up to 200 people are being held in Gaza. Is there a chance to free them? And what is your view on Qatar's role in these negotiations?
Well, there are negotiations going on. That's true. 4 hostages have now been released. I have the sad feeling, though, that this is simply a way for Hamas to drag things out. To dribble hostages out 2 by 2 by 2. They have 220. So at this rate, at 2 here, 2 there, it could be a long time. And that's giving Hamas time for further defensive actions to see if perhaps Hezbollah is getting ready to open a second front in the north. I don't think time is on Israel's side here. I think we all want the hostages released. It's a barbarity that they were taken in the first place. But ultimately, the question for Israel is what's it going to do to protect its overall national security? And for the United States, what are we going to do to stop Iran from continuing this barbaric and destabilizing behavior all over the region?
Вы знаете, не могу я не задать...
I can't not ask one last question, Mr. Bolton. But you worked with Donald Trump, and he always says that if he were president right now, no conflicts would have arisen. Neither the Ukraine war nor the one in the Middle East. And you've mentioned that decisiveness that America needs right now. Do you see Donald Trump as the leader that would be capable of stopping all of this bloodshed? He seems to stand a good chance at a reelection.
Well, I don't think he has the slightest idea what's going on in the Middle East, and his notion that if he were still president, none of this would have happened is just juvenile. And really, it's a further demonstration of why he's not fit to be president, and why I certainly hope he's not reelected.
Okay.
We shall see. This has been John Bolton, former United States National Security Advisor and former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. I would like to thank you for joining us today. It is always interesting and informative to discuss current world affairs with you.
We operated in Russia for 12 years, and the government tried to get rid of us 3 times. They got us on the 6th day of the war in Ukraine.
Мы временно приостанавливаем работу телеканала.
We left Russia, but we kept going. We have now decided to tell the truth about Russia, the war, and Russian society in English as well.
Kherson is Putin's 3rd major defeat in a row.
What is wrong with the Russian army?
Stories no one else can tell you. Hear it right from the source. Subscribe to our channel.